Hi. In this episode of Growing Your Sense of Self, I'm going to suggest another exercise for you to do. And if you recall back in the introductory seminar, we talked about the powers of Superman. We did the thought-feeling experiment where you had the powers of Superman, super strong and vulnerable. You could fly, those kinds of things. The physical stuff we will be doing as the program rolls along. But there was one in there that you might have said, well, how do you do that? X-ray vision. How do you see into and through things? Well, that's the purpose of this experiment. In this experiment, I had given you lists of traits of a person with a strong sense of self and a person with a low sense of self, a weak sense of self. And they are very revealing of what a person is, right? There's nothing that defines who a person is more accurately, more thoroughly than the way they define themselves, their sense of self. And they don't go around talking about it, especially if they maybe don't have such a strong sense of self. Or even if they do, they're too humble to talk about it. So, but you can see, this is a way you can see into a person. You see the what that people do. That's very easy to see. The why is the harder thing. And the why is driven by the sense of self, right? That's the thing that directs our perceptions and perceptions that we determine our reality. So you'll understand a person's reality better by understanding, you have to deduce or infer, the strength of their sense of self by their actions. And you know that from the list of traits. So on the what and why, let me give an example of that. Everybody saw apples falling from trees, but it was Isaac Newton that asked, well, why? That was the what. Apples fall from tree. What happened? They fell. But why? And that led to an enormous new understanding of the laws of physics. Understanding of gravity. Now, what I'd like you to do in this exercise, you take that list of traits. Now you don't have to necessarily score them on it, as I asked you to do in an earlier self-assessment. You can, but it's not as necessary. But just sort of look and see. So I would like you to sort of do this twice. Take a person who you don't think very highly of. The guy's a pain in the butt for you, or whatever the heck it is, a boss or a guy that reports to you, or a neighbor you can't get along with. And look at that person. You have to pick somebody that you know. You can't pick some celebrity or something because they have all of these facades that go on. You say, well, I think this guy highly of this guy. Yeah, but there's just layers. You can't get to the true person. So pick somebody that you know, personally know, and assess them based on what they say, what they do, according to the traits of a strong sense of self person or a low sense of self person. And then become to understand them. So I had some people do this, and for instance, a woman did it about her boss, who was relentlessly pounding on her about this, that, or what she thought were nitty things. And she was taking that on. She was wearing that. What the heck's wrong with me? When she did this exercise, she saw a lot about her boss that wasn't very attractive. They were the low sense of self traits, and she could see them over and over again. Say, aha! It wasn't me. It was her. And I was wearing the stuff she was projecting out. And it changed her life in that environment. So there's a very positive value you can get from this. And then also take somebody who you greatly admire, that you know personally, and say, this person really has their stuff together. I can always count them. I can depend on them. I go to them for counsel. I can share things with them and know I can trust that it's not going anywhere else unless I sort of tell them they can go somewhere else with it. And assess that person as well. Again, high level, you don't have to even write anything down. You can look and say, yep, they got that. Yep, they're pretty strong there. Yep, on a strong sense of self things. And see how people score for you. And the people that you admire, see that they'll tend to be people with a stronger sense of self. And the people maybe that you don't admire so much, they'll tend to be people with the low sense of self traits. Now, there may be a caveat about this. There was a guy I was working with who, I'll say he struggled with his sense of self. And I shared a list with him, and he looked at the strong sense of self traits, and he said, what's so good about those? I don't see why those are good. Why would anybody want to have those? Okay, well, I wouldn't say he's a lost cause. He's a young guy in his 20s. So, but there may be the case, what you tend to find is people with a low sense of self, with a really weak sense of self, will tend to think highly of other people with a weak sense of self. Well, not always, but they can tend to do that because they relate with them more. And they want to, okay, I can bond with this person. But it's like misery loves company, and that's where these people sit. So That can happen. So you might find a person you claim to admire a lot has a bunch of traits of a low sense of self. If that does happen, I suggest that's a red flag for you to start looking at them. Well, why would that be? Ask the why. Always ask the why when you see the what. All right, so there's an exercise, always optional, but valuable. I suggest you try that, and actually I encourage you to try that and see what you get out of it. And as always, you can post insights you gain in the comment section below. So thank you very much. Kamsahamnida and toodles.